Hello, everybody, and happy Monday morning. I am Angie Callen, your host of No More Mondays podcast, the show where we believe you deserve to have a thriving career or business and an amazing life on your terms. So what I do, I bring you guests who not only prove that fact, but who have great resources to help you live and work more brilliantly. So I want to know, for all of you entrepreneurs and coaches who are out there listening, how's business? If you just got a little queasy feeling in the pit of your stomach, you need to stay tuned into this show, because we've all been there when business is not quite where we want it to be. And today I've got a great resource to help you out with moving forward. And her name is Stacey Brown Randall. Stacey is an award-winning author, speaker, and fellow podcast host who helps businesses grow their referral base naturally. I'm a big fan of authenticity, so you know I love that word. If you do not like where your business is at, listen up, because Stacey and I are about to give you both inspiration and some tactical advice to help you get things moving in the right direction or to the level that you want them to be. I'm even more excited to hear more about this. Stacey, welcome to No More Mondays.
Angie, thank you so much for having me.
I'm super excited. And for all of you out there, I'll give you a look behind the curtain. Stacey is actually part of my in real life network, who I met in real life. She's part of the world who came to me via The Thing, which you've all heard a lot about, because I've had some amazing guests who have come and shared their stories who I met there. And I love how Stacey has a really straightforward and very practical, easy to understand and implement approach to business growth and referral. So I think this will be a fun conversation. And I'm going to kick it off with a unique perspective I know you have, Stacey, kind of maybe debunking this myth or an uncommon belief that you have to ask for referrals. So old school sales training, a lot of times will say, hey, you got to ask for the referral. And I know you don't necessarily have that perspective. So tell me more about that.
Yeah, I have the exact opposite perspective. I like to call myself a contrarian in the world of referrals, because for decades and decades, probably generations, definitely longer than you and I have been alive, the advice on referrals has always been, if you want them, you're going to have to ask for them. And it never took into account that the majority of us were like, oh, that's terrible. I don't want to do that. Can't there be another way? And they're like, no, you have to ask, or you don't get any referrals. And that's just like the saddest and most depressing thing I've ever heard. And I, like most people, have heard that same information. When I was in business, I was first in sales and marketing, working for a company, and then in my own business. And that's what I heard too. And I was like, this is terrible. I don't ever want to do it. So I never did. And I never really generated any referrals, or the ones I did get seemed very like sporadic and lucky versus anything I could have control over or count on. I mean, I remember one of the articles I found, the title of it was 25 ways to ask for a referral without feeling desperate or without looking desperate. And I was like, I'm sorry, everybody reading this article is way smart. We are not stupid people. And we know that if you need 25 ways not to look desperate when you're asking for a referral, it's because we know we all feel and look desperate. Like, why isn't there better advice out there? And I guess it's just, something that is waiting for me to discover, and that I did. So it's really interesting, because it is sometimes I feel like I'm pushing a huge boulder up a hill, and that hill is standard advice, old school advice, been around for longer than I've been around, advice of how to get referrals. And I come on the scene, I'm like, wait, if we apply the science to referrals and we understand what's really happening when a referral is being given, we can build out different strategies and tactics. And that's what I teach my clients to do.
Well, and the whole point, let's just think practically for a second, because if you need 25 ways not to feel like a jackass when you're asking for a referral, there's probably one way to circumnavigate all that. Because if you think about the whole goal of a referral-based business is essentially, in my mind, not to have to do outbound marketing and sales. It's to have referrals come to you. And so the contrarian in you, I agree with. And I'm also curious, you brought up something I was going to talk about, which is that like icky feeling. We don't like asking for referrals. We don't like asking people to support our business. When we launch a business, the last people we usually tell is our inner circle, because it feels weird to go tell the people who love you most what you're up to. Why is that?
Well, I don't think that is a question that can be unpacked in any short amount of time, because I think people have different reasons for why they are willing to tell or more likely not willing to tell. I mean, I remember when I started my first business, my dad was so mad because I left working for the Chamber of Commerce. And that was a job he could understand. He could explain. When people said, "What is Stacey up to?" He could be like, "Oh, she works for the Chamber of Commerce." Let alone the fact, I mean, I didn't love the job. I didn't have the best bosses while I worked there. I didn't make crap for money. Like, it was not where I wanted to be. It was never going to be able to provide to me what I was looking for in terms of true growth. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So of course, eventually I was probably going to want to do that. But I remember him being so mad at me because he was like, "Well, I can't explain what you do. And now you've got this business and I can't understand it. And I'm trying to explain it." And I was like, "That's not my problem." And it's a little hard, or it's not the same thing for you to be able to explain it. And I think because like when people do start businesses, like for me, it was like, okay, to this day, I wonder if my mom could actually tell you what I do. Like, I'm not sure. So I think some of it's that, right? Some of it's that when you decide to go into business entrepreneurship and you have a network of humans that are W-2 employees, sometimes it is like a lack of understanding of just whatever job it is or whatever company it is you're trying to start. Like what you're doing doesn't make any sense to them. If you're an attorney,
sometimes it doesn't even make any sense to us. It's so ambiguous that it takes a little time for us to articulate it. So, parents who come from the structured work environment days, because I would say my mom and dad were same way when I left engineering. They're like, "Wait, well, what do we tell people?" And because I know she's out there listening, hi, Sonny, she now understands what I do because she listened to every single one of these. But it took a little while to kind of like close that gap of the, like, you are living in the unknown.
Well, and it's funny because I always tell entrepreneurs when they start their business and they'll be like, "Oh, what advice do you have for me?" I was like, the number one thing you need to understand is what your business will look like in 3 years is not what it looks like now. So don't marry it because you don't even know what's coming. And you need to be able to be flexible and to like figure it out. And like, it's okay to have a plan. It's okay to be like, "I'm going to do this. I'm going to offer it this way. And these are who my clients are going to be." Great. And as you head down that path, throw the picture of what you think it's going to look like at the end away because it's going to change and morph so much. And, for some people, like if you're an attorney at a large firm and then you leave that large firm to go start your own law practice, everybody gets it because you're still an attorney. Right. It's like everybody else that leaves and it's like, "I used to do this and now I'm carving out this space to do this." And sometimes it's easier to be understood than others in terms of that kind of like that business ownership. But, for me, it was just, I think sometimes we don't also have that fear of failure of like, "Oh, if I tell everybody and then it fails, then I have to tell everybody that it failed," which is, I went through with my first business. And so I sometimes think it's that will they get it? Will they care? And then what if it's not successful? And then later they find out or I have to tell them that it failed. And 82%, I think that's the statistic of small businesses will fail within their first 5 years. So it's like, just buckle up, buttercup, because it's going to be a bumpy ride and it's going to be fine. And you may get through it. And, I'm one of those that my very first business made it to year 4. Did not make it to year 5. I am part of the 82%. I am a member of the Business Failure Club. I actually had my own little badge made, but I didn't give up and I did it. And I was like, "I'm going to own a business and be successful." And here I am with my second business, almost 12 years in. And so, right. I mean, I just think that the journey, especially when we're younger, like in our 20s and 30s, it's supposed to be success after success after success. And it's not. It's like this zigzag line of like backwards and forwards and failures and successes and leaps and bounds and negatives. It's just what it is. But trying to explain that to other people, it's a little bit harder.
Yeah. And I think that feeling of you hit it on the nail on the head is like egg on your face. If I fail, I'm going to have to now tell them I failed at the thing I told them I was doing. And then also the general global fear all of us had is like fear of not being accepted. So are they going to accept what I'm doing? But if you are convicted about what you're doing, you're actually causing a disservice to yourself by not telling the inner circle who's there to support you and also can probably help you flesh out speaking about what you're doing, which is huge. And you kind of gave us a little tidbit into it, and let's talk about the failure thing, because the failure has turned into a 4-letter word. And we've all seen that meme that says, "We think growth looks like this," right? And really it's like this, whether you have a job or a career or a business or, whatever, nothing is linear. And I think we got to ditch the expectation that it is. And I want to hear more about, I wish we could just take the word failure out and replace it with I learned. Right. And so I would love to hear a little bit more about, newsflash for all the coaches listening. Stacey actually was a coach at one point in time, which I found out as we were chatting at the beginning of this. So I thought that was an interesting little tidbit to kind of bring to this whole story of like, what you do now is not what you did. There was some lows in between. What did that journey look like? And more importantly, what did you learn from it that applies to today's success?
Yeah, it was a really interesting journey. I wouldn't change it for anything. That doesn't mean it wasn't hard. And like you said, there were some lows. I'm like, there was some deep down lows, like in the deep down for any of those folks who are watching Silo. I was in the deep down. Like,
we just watched an episode last night. That's funny. You're in the way down deep.
The way down deep, like way down deep. But I think that, for me, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. So it's not unusual for us to sit around the Thanksgiving table and talk about business. The problem is almost all the entrepreneurs in my family run restaurants. And so they're like crazy kind of entrepreneurs.
I was going to say, speaking of volatility and entrepreneurship, I'm married to a former F&B professional. So I get that. That's a different spice of life right there.
It is. I call them the crazy kind. They're the crazy kind of entrepreneurs. And I can say that because I have a grandmother and I'm a niece and I'm the sister and the daughter and the wife of people who all own restaurants. So like, for me, it's like, you people are crazy. And I know, because I have the inside glimpse inside to that life. But anyway, not to, my poor entrepreneur friends who are.
And aren't we glad they do? Because I love a good dinner out.
Yeah. Don't we all? Right. I mean, I married somebody who owned a restaurant, so I never had to cook. I mean, it was like quite brilliant on my part.
Well played.
Yes. And I don't know how to cook, and it's like a badge of honor for me. So, when I think about the journey to becoming an entrepreneur, I always knew I wanted it. Then it was the question of, well, what am I going to sell? What can I do? What does that look like? And I was working at the chamber, like I said, and I was working, and there was another company. It was a husband and wife team that owned a research company. And they came to me and they said, hey, the area that I was working in at the chamber, they were like, this is really cool. You're like kind of an expert in this area. And we really would like to open a division within our company in that area. And I was like, yes. So I joined a partnership, but a husband and wife team with you as a partner is not a equal partnership, and it was their business, and those were some hard lessons for me to learn. And I said yes to joining their partnership. I was probably in partnership with them for less than a year, but when I said yes and left my full-time job, I was also 4 weeks pregnant and did not know it. So that just made that whole first year like bonkers. And then the very first client I landed for that company came to me offline and was like, hey, what you're doing with this company, you could do on your own. Like, not the piece that they were experts in, but the piece that I was. And like, and I'll support you and be your first client. And I was like, okay. So I started my own business. That was my first client. It was like a 6-figure client for the first couple of years, which, let's be honest, is a beautiful way to start a business, but lulls you into complacency real fast.
Not a great way to sustain a business, because you lose that client. Guess what happens?
Yeah. And you don't have to work very hard trying to figure out all the systems and processes of how you're going to bring on new clients. You don't have to figure out the prospecting and the marketing pipeline. You don't have to figure out your sales process. There's
a full sense of security there for sure. So like if you're taking notes out there, potential trap number 1, Stacey just brought it up.
Yes. And so when that client was no longer a client after 2 years in, then it was like scramble, hustle, like real quickly. One of the things that I learned with my first business is that I had to figure out how to touch business development every day. But when I say every day, I don't mean like Monday through Friday every day. I just mean like you have to have processes and systems. You have to know what you're doing. You have to have ways to bring in potential clients, and you have to have those work for you. They have to be done in a way that you are willing to do them. And that's really important, because anybody can cold call. Most people don't survive past the first or second call block. So, I mean, you can do anything for a short amount of time, but can you love that for a long amount of time? And so for me, it was like, oh crap. And then it became like this hustle and networking game. And I have 3 kids, right? I mean, I added a second, then I eventually added a third, but like, so it just became like that. I don't have time to network all the time. And I got all this going on in my personal life, and I'm trying to grow a business. 4 years in, that business failed. I had to go back to corporate America. That was a really, really hard transition back in. I got certified though, like on the side. So I've been known in my past to like have side hustles while having a full-time job. So earlier in my career, when I was in my 20s, before I got married, I got my real estate license while working in marketing for a magazine. I got my real estate license because my husband owned a restaurant and was like never around nights and weekends. I'm like, I'm gonna go sell some real estate and make some extra money, which is like how we had a down payment for our first house. And so, I did. So it wasn't unusual for me to be like, hey, I have this job that I don't love. Good people don't love it. And I'm going to get certified. And I got certified as a productivity coach. And I really did spend some time being like, okay, when I go back out on my own, how am I not going to land in the business failure club again? Nobody needs to be a 2-time member. And that kind of forced a lot of decisions and a lot of throwing spaghetti on the wall and a lot of like, let's figure this out. And one of the things I discovered was in my first business, whereas I did have more than that one client, I did learn how to bring clients on. I got all of them by being in the right place at the right time. Do you know what it means? Truly what it means to be in the right place at the right time? It means you're in all the places all the time.
All the time.
And so
there is no single one right place.
Oh my gosh, there's not. And so when you don't really know, you're like, right place, right time.
Yep.
Just really meant I was hanging out all the places all the time and my life was bananas. And so it was just one of those things, right? Where, I can remember, I have like very, very interesting memories of like trying to like be a mom during the day with my kid at home napping and sitting in the other room, like taking prospect calls or client calls or trying to do work and like losing my kid one day. Literally saw that he got out of his crib and out of his room. He was like 2. I don't think his sister was born yet. And so like, I was like, all of a sudden I heard a door open and I was like, and then you're in the middle of that. Like, I got to wrap up this phone call with this prospect really fast so I don't lose the potential. But at the same time, I got to go find my kid. He was like,
or say to the prospect, hey, hang on a second. I think I lost my kid, which is an instant credibility buster if you're trying to sign a client for productivity.
All I did was I kept my eye on the driveway. I'm like, okay, as long as Jacob doesn't go into the front yard, he won't get into the street, I'll be fine. I found him in the backyard sitting at the picnic table, just waiting for mommy to finish her call. Like, just,
there you go.
But it's just interesting, like all the things that we do, right? So I totally got off topic. I apologize. But what I learned with that first business is how am I going to touch business development every day in a way that works for me? Because all my clients were landed, because I networked, I was on that committee, I was on this committee, I belonged to this group, I was here, I was there. Because that's where all my clients came from, I didn't get any referrals. And I was like, there's got to be a better way. But I'd always been told you had to ask, or you had to pay, incentivize, you got to give kickbacks, right? Or you've got to be seen all the time. I'm like, well, I've been seen all the time. And that didn't produce referrals. It did produce some clients, but not referrals. And the other thing is that you're also told to be really gimmicky and promotional, like put in your email signature, hey, the greatest compliment you can give me is a referral. That doesn't trigger a referral, not when you actually know what does and what doesn't. And so I was like, great, those 4 ways suck. I don't want to do them. And I know they don't work. So what else am I going to do?
Those 4 out of the book of 25 and keep debunking the rest of the 21.
All of them are bad. Yeah. So I just started throwing spaghetti on the wall. I was like, okay, here I am. I got started in my corporate job. I got certified as a productivity coach. When I left that corporate job about 15 months after starting, I did not last long. I do not make a great employee. Just
no entrepreneur will. Nope.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, okay, now I'm a productivity coach and I got to get some clients. And I did have my first couple of clients did come from networking. I'm a big believer in networking, but I'm a big believer in strategic networking and doing it specifically for a reason, and having a path and a plan for it. And so I did get my first 3 clients came from networking, and that one of those clients of my first 3 ended up being someone who like gave me a referral. And it was at that moment I was like, okay, that was lucky. Now, what the heck have I been doing to generate those referrals? And in that first year, I got 112 referrals that I never asked for or paid for or had to put an email signature, give me your referrals.
Yep.
And I was like, great, let me reverse engineer this. And it was at that point when my productivity coaching was for small business owners. Those are my people. That's my tribe. And so I was like, all right, I want to like coach with them. I want to be in community with them because I was like, I could see a business. Now I can see a business failure coming from like a mile away. And so I was like, that's who I was getting referrals from. So those small business owners said, you're growing, you're increasing your rate. It's harder to get on your schedule. what are you doing? And I was like, I'm getting all these referrals and it's amazing. And they said, thanks for teaching me to tame my inbox, but I really want to learn your referral strategy. And then that put me on that, oh shit, I don't know. What am I doing? And so I had to reverse engineer what was happening. Oh, I say this. Oh, I do this. Oh, I've identified this person in this way for this reason. And then that now 12 years later has become an entire way of teaching referrals without asking or manipulation. That's 20 different strategies. No business owner needs them all. And it's looking at referrals like an ecosystem within your business. So some things we put into place and they're automated, and some things are plans that we put in place to how we cultivate people to refer. But it's a way of actually developing your business in a way that will be much more sustainable, but also proven to work.
And we're going to get some of those secrets in a second, but I want to tie a few things together here, because to go back to something you said towards the beginning of our conversation is that your business will not look like today what it looked like 3 years ago, or maybe even 3 months ago. And it won't look like that again in 3 months or another 3 years. Mm-hmm. And you have to be a little careful of having blinders on to potential opportunities, or adapting when you need to, or saying this isn't working, do something else when you need to, because the experience that you had, in my opinion, the productivity coaching led to this, not because not only because you realized how to get referrals, but because it's productive and efficient, right? And so it was almost like a seed that was planted. And because we're talking about like, how do you avoid business failure in a way is the roundabout conversation here. Referrals are a great way to avoid that, by the way. I have a story that I think I've maybe only tapped into, touched on once here, but I am also a business failure. Or have had a business failure. It was a real big, life-shaking, like total tanking event. That, long story short, is, my husband and I bought an existing business. It was high overhead. The books didn't look like what we thought we bought. And so we found ourselves really upside down inside of 2.5 years and went bankrupt, both the business and us. Newsflash, career benders in my business are helped us recover from it. And so there are entrepreneurial success stories that can help you recover. And if you have to go back to employment for a little while, it's what you have to do. But just because you try and fail once doesn't mean you're not meant to succeed. And for me, what I know happened in that business, I've taken forward. So I know, don't hold on to things too long, because that's one of the things we did that caused things to spiral out of control as much as they did. And if I'd have let go a year and a half earlier, the damage would not have been as great, right? So that's where like the seeing things and having failure experiences opens up your eyes to these. And now Stacey's got an amazing, successful business because she was willing to use past learned experiences from failures to bring into a business that she saw an opportunity to evolve. And now the sky is the limit. So,
well, and I would say to that too, it's really hard to recognize those moments when they're happening the first time.
Yes, it is.
And so that is actually the gift of those moments, is that they're training you and teaching you and helping you remind yourself and others that when that moment comes around again and it's a moment to do something different, you'll be better at seeing it. Like my husband and I were just having this conversation. Something didn't happen the way he wanted it to happen at work. And I was like, this moment does not matter. I was like, but you will look back at this thing not going your way as like, it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I was like, but this thing not happening the way you want it to does give you the potential to decide, are you going to look back and this be the moment you made a pivot and you made a shift and you went forward in a different direction, or are you going to wallow in your pity? Like that's your options. It's like, that's what it looked like. And I reminded him, like I went back to corporate America after my business failure. Technically, I was fired, but we created this messaging around, we're going to let Stacey go because Stacey wants to go, because Stacey wanted to go, but Stacey
needs to go.
Stacey needs to go. She wants to go, but Stacey kind of needs a paycheck. And we want to manage this messaging because Stacey is known. And so that's how we worked it out. It was like, hey, this isn't working. And like, you're right. Let's mutually go our own way. So that's technically fired with the like packaging and a little like severance on the back end, which was great. I mean, I really appreciated that. That's what happened for me. And that's what the company did. But I tell people this all the time. I'm like, I got my butt fired. That is not the defining moment in my life. My business failure that led to that job that I then had to get fired from, neither of those are the defining moments in terms of who I became. except for the fact that I use those moments as points in the past to make different decisions moving forward.
One of the most powerful things I heard in the last year or two was a human cannot be a failure. Failure is an incident, an action, a verb. It is not a noun or a state of being. You can fail at something, but that does not define you as a failure unless you let it. And I think what Stacey and I are both talking about here is not letting it and in fact turning it into something that informs the next step, which, to come full circle, is in a roundabout way how you landed in the business that you're in now and tapped into the secrets of how you generate a successful referral based business without asking.
Yep. I mean, the fact that I get to show up every day and talk about this and teach my clients and stand on stages and do podcast episodes like this, or have my second book come out, my first book's already out, or do my podcast, the fact that I get to talk about this all day long is because I was like, business failure sucks, and here I got to do something different. And then I learned, and then I applied, and then I created a successful framework from it. First, it worked for me. Then I started testing it out with other clients. When it worked for them, then I was like, now we're off to the races. And that's the other thing is, with my first business that failed, what I realized is that I also never had a plan in place for scaling, because you can't scale when you're drowning. And my business was basically drowning the whole time. And so when I started this second business, not only was it, how am I going to generate business in a way that works for me, discovered referrals, I was always paying attention to what's the thing I can scale, because you cannot scale hourly coaching. And it's just
now you're preaching to the choir over here, my friend. But yes, that is you can grow it. However, you cannot scale it, because you will reach a limit of your time and the money you can charge for it.
Yeah. And you can scale a coaching practice in a lot of different ways, but it isn't going to be by adding more hours. Like, no, that's not eventually what's going to happen. And so for me, I was always paying attention to that. I was always like, okay, is productivity the thing I want to scale? It wasn't. The person who taught me is like a master at that, Carson Tate. I was like, I don't need to be her. She's already wonderful. Like, I don't want to scale this whole idea of like productivity. It's what I'm doing now to pay the bills and build a business. But when the referral thing kind of hit me, I was like, that's what I will scale. And let me tell you, the business, in terms of scaling and changing the model, I have gone through so many model changes. The content and the framework and my expertise has never changed. But how I deliver that, oh my Lord, all the changes.
It's like she's standing over here in my office watching what I'm up to right now, because guess what? Active in that process. You said a word I love a minute ago, which is frameworks. And so I think it'd be a really cool thing to kind of top off this conversation with some practical advice in that, what is this secret and kind of what is the framework for getting referrals naturally, getting referrals without asking, and building a sustainable business that's fail-proof?
Yeah. So I always have folks think about your referral generation in an ecosystem, meaning referrals aren't all a nail and all you need is a hammer, right? So people who believe that I'm going to teach you how to ask for referrals, they think referrals are a nail and the asking is the hammer. And we look at it as like this ecosystem. You got a toolbox full of different tools needed for different reasons. But this ecosystem is like the places where all referrals can be and are probably hiding and should be within your business. So we kind of think of like just a circle that kind of goes around. But when you're looking at the framework of what actually makes referrals happen, it always starts with understanding having the right specific strategies in place that your business needs. Again, I teach 20. I mentioned that earlier, but not everybody uses all of them. But everybody uses a couple of very true, the proven to work processes that are foundational in nature. And so it's all about having the right strategies that are right for you and your business. And so that framework it's the right strategies done for the right people or at the right moments. And then it kind of goes into, okay, strategies are great, but you also then have to know what you're saying when you're doing the application, the outreach, the touch points, the whatever you're doing, right? For whoever these people are. So the specific strategies go to people. Like, it's specific groups of humans should have a plan for how you're going to cultivate referrals from them. And that's what you do to them within that strategy. Then it's also what you say. And then the third piece of that is your consistency, because referrals really are a long-term game. I have people come to me and they're like, my business is on its last leg. This is my Hail Mary. And I'm like, keep your money. Do not give it to me, because this is not going to work for you the way you need it to. I'm not SEO. Like there is, there may be a changing algorithm for SEO and social media and all those kind of things, but we don't ever say get rich quick. Like that's just not how it works in referrals, because we're talking about
it takes time to build relationships that will bring referrals. And if you're going to do this naturally, that's a part of the strategy, right? Of who are these people?
Naturally,
and you can't go ahead.
I was going to say naturally in terms of, I want to be really clear about this. Naturally in terms of you will feel natural doing it, but there are things you will learn to do and say. It's not like, just let it happen, it's coming. No, that's called hope. Beautiful, not a strategy for business.
Not a great feeling, not a strategy.
So when we use the word naturally, what we mean is that it's going to be not manipulative. You're not going to take advantage or compromise your relationships that you have. But there is other things to do. You have to learn to do other things and say other things and do other things to have success. So I just want to define naturally. It's not like it just magically happens.
There's a difference between active naturally versus like organic, it's coming my way. And I think the important thing, and I want to highlight the fact that this is not an overnight turn around your business strategy. This is long-term sustainability, because referrals don't come in quickly. And while you can kind of predict and anticipate, you also don't have full control over how often referrals come in necessarily, or at least the volume of them. You can predict and get an idea of how consistent it will bring your business, but I can't say, okay, tomorrow Stacey's going to send me a lead.
Right. No one can say that actually about anything.
Yeah.
You can't even say that about your SEO. I mean, you really
no. An SEO is, oh man, that would be. I feel like you and I would just stand on a soapbox and shout into the void and violently agree about everything regarding SEO.
Well, and you can't say about social media. I'm going to make this post tomorrow, and it's going to land me a $20,000 client. Like nothing really works that way. But you're right. It's what you control are the actions that you take, and following a proven process and framework, and then being consistent with that is ultimately what works. I mean, people will say, "Can every business get referrals?" And I'm like, yes. But I don't work with every business. Every business is not the right fit for me. And it's not the right fit for the strategies I'm going to teach you, because ROI matters too. And so I do have people who come to work with me and they're like, oh my gosh, I doubled my referrals in like 45 days. And that is like, that's great. We want people to double, triple, or quadruple their referrals. We say give it like a year, but sometimes it happens in 90 days. Sometimes it happens faster. But I always tell folks when that happens, that means you have no idea how much money you've been leaving on the table for years, because
for however many years you weren't doing it,
because you weren't doing the right things. And so, yes, there's no guarantee that tomorrow you'll get a referral or any other type of prospect that will come into you from any other type of lead source. But it is that idea of understanding what you should be doing. And then I always tell folks, when people decide they're going to hire me, I'm like, do you want to learn from me? Like Stacey, the person. Second, do you want to learn the way I'm going to teach you, my philosophy and how I teach, the fact that we don't ask and we don't pay and things like that. And then it's now how do you want to learn that? Because I work with my clients in a couple of different ways. That second piece of like, do you want to learn referrals the way I teach it? That matters, because my philosophy informs every tactic, every strategy I teach, every piece of language that I help a client write.
And with anything that's coach or coach-like, which in a way this is, we're teaching, giving people a playbook and teaching people to fish. You have to find a methodology, a framework, and a human who you kind of jive with. And I actually want to give a couple very specific little tools or practical pieces of advice out there, because this is one thing I love to do on No More Mondays. So what are your favorite 3, or maybe the most common 3 tools in the 20-point referral toolbox you see people using, or your favorite to have people deploy?
Okay. Yeah. So let me give you there's a lot, but you said 3. So I'm going to stick to that request. But let me give you a kind of on different areas, because I think that would be helpful. Number 1 is business owners, particularly you guys, you have to be tracking. You have to be tracking what's happening. When a prospect shows up into your world, into your pipeline, and has shown any level of interest or maybe hiring you, you better be tracking where they're coming from. And if they're being referred to you by someone else, a referral source is always a human. You need to be capturing that person's name. So number 1, the number 1 thing I have clients do when they work with me is they have to complete this tracker thing of like past data. If you're already tracking this stuff, it makes it so much easier.
Yes.
Just track what's happening in your business. You make better decisions anyways when you can see the data, and you'll know exactly who are the other humans that are referring potential clients to you. So tracking definitely is the first thing that I would say. The second kind of tool that I always like for people to think about is the language piece. Right now, this is my secret sauce. This is kind of always like behind the curtain, behind the paywall, is the language piece that I teach, the formula, the rationale behind it, the reasoning, how it works, why it works, when you use it, when you don't, the cadence, all the things, right? But the easiest thing for someone to do is to not miss out on opportunities. Let me teach you one piece of language that I teach. It's called the How's Business Script. You walk into a networking event. I don't care if you're an employee, right? I don't care if you're a business owner. You walk into a networking event and someone says, hey, how's it going? How's business? What's up? The number one thing you should not be saying is, it's great, it sucks, it's okay, whatever that answer is. What you should be saying is relating it back to how referrals are going in your business. So the proper response to the how's business question is, oh my gosh, Angie, thanks so much for asking me how business is. I really appreciate that. Actually, business is great. We just ended the year really strong. We brought on a number of new clients that we kicked off this year. And about 75% of those clients were actually referred to me by other people that I know, like in the community, right? Whatever your answer is, but you tie it back to whatever is happening from a referral perspective, but you cannot lie. Like, I just feel like I need to say that. So you got to figure out what is the truth about how's business when it generates from referrals. And that's your answer. It percolates, it plants a referral seed. It could have fallen on concrete and go nowhere, but you don't know if it's going to do anything different. You also
power of suggestion. You just planted a seed to somebody that, oh, you take referrals.
Yes. And you don't know, first of all, you don't know if it's planted on concrete or fertile ground. And second of all, you cannot expect a referral explosion from one little house business answer, right? But it does see who that percolates with and what happens. Right? If you continue to cultivate that relationship because it's someone who has potential to refer you, that's where it starts, right? So tracking what's going on in your business, moving forward, knowing where your clients come from or your prospects come from, making sure you know how to answer the how's business question with the right referral seed language. And the third thing I would say is you need to know who's referring you now. If you've received referrals in 2024 and 2023 and 2022, you need to be able to tell me by showing me a list of the names of the people, first and last names, who referred to you. We call this the client and prospect look back tracker, where you actually go back in your business, you pull out all your clients and you're like, where did all of them come from? And here's all the ones, those clients that referred. Who referred them? Oh, here's the names of those referral sources. That list of names of your referral sources is your list of gold. And if I were to start working with you, the number one thing I would tell you is that's who we're starting with. People who've referred you before are more likely to refer you again. And so that is where we're going to start to kind of get some momentum going with referrals while we build in other strategies to work as well.
I got nothing to say. Although, of course I do. I'm going to take a quick little aside and connect dots in a way that you all might not expect, because, we've really focused this conversation around entrepreneurship and what referrals can do for business. But there is a very, very parallel story here for any of you out there that are employees and are either thinking about job searching, might ever job search, or have a job. So that's pretty much all of you. And this idea of referrals, we always talk about continue networking in the job searching world and never stop networking, because it's what opens you up to referrals into jobs naturally without ever having to go LinkedIn message somebody. And also, how critical is messaging if you do have to do that? But there's this idea that if you build a group of allies, these opportunities come back to you naturally. And all you had to do was start with a relationship building aspect that was strategic. I'm a big fan of strategic networking and job searching as well. It's like a little bit of work smarter instead of harder, or maybe like strategically instead of just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
We call that spray and pray.
Yep, I call it spray and pray too. That's trigger happy on the apply button is what I call spray and pray, when somebody just decides to go out and throw their resume to everyone and anyone in the world, versus this idea of like using who's in your circle. Because I would even venture to throw out the third tip: know who's referring you. If you've had somebody refer you to a job before or hire you before, aren't they the first person that you're going to go to, because they already know your work ethic, they already know you can perform? And in the business sense, If it's a client, you need to know clients are referring you because clearly you've done enough to build that referral. Maybe colleagues are referring you because you have a specialty they can't fill. But if you don't know your numbers, you're never going to be able to connect to those dots and leverage the assets that you built without even knowing it.
Absolutely.
There you go. Every business should have referrals. It could be a game changer for the future and the sustainability of your business, and you can do it naturally. I think that's what Stacey and I are here standing here talking about. Because I could even come and I don't need to talk about what's happened in my business, but I could say that without trying very hard, a lot of what you have suggested, I have done without necessarily knowing it. And then all of a sudden you're like, wow, my referrals are picking up. And then you reverse engineer it and you're like, oh, okay, here's how. You just got to pay attention and have a strategy, which is what Stacey can help you with. Shameless plug.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Speaking of shameless plugs, how does everybody out there find you and what resources can they grab from you? Because I know you're kind of everywhere as well.
Yeah. So home base is the website. It's my full name, StaceyBrownRandall.com. That gets you pointed in the right directions for anything you'd be interested in. But since you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to watching this as a live stream and a podcast. I'm guessing you probably are down with listening to podcasts. So mine is Roadmap to Referrals. We drop a new episode every Tuesday, and we're coming up on episode 350, which is crazy to actually think about. And then
huge milestone. Congratulations on that. Yeah, podcasting is not for the faint of heart or the time constraint.
Podcasting for the long run is not for the faint of heart. Anybody can knock out 10 episodes.
Yep.
It's everything after that that's a lot harder. Yeah. And then, of course, if you're like, hey, I do like watching this video, but I'm not really a podcast listener, my book, Generating Business Referrals Without Asking, is available for purchase wherever you like to purchase books. And book number 2 will be out in the fall of 2025.
Exciting. Maybe we'll have to have you back for round 2, right in time for that launch.
I would love that. Thank you.
Awesome. There you have it, everybody. Stacey Brown Randall. You can visit her at LinkedIn, on her website at the same name. Here to remind you that you can recover from failure. You can use it to your advantage, and you can build a referral-based business without trying too hard. So follow her on LinkedIn, follow me on LinkedIn, grab her book, check out her podcast. Head on over to the website where you can find out more about some of these tools and strategies that we talked about today. It's all about building relationships, people. And as a former engineer who loves people, I'm a big fan. I'll see you next week for another edition of No More Mondays podcast.